Welcome to the Let's Eat Grandma Job Seekers Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Let's Eat Grandma Job Seekers Podcast. We have an amazing episode, especially for professionals in the world of branding and marketing. Have you ever had a refreshing Coke Zero or sipped on a bottle of Evian on a hot day? Do you drink wine? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, there's a strong possibility you've been impacted by my next guest. As E&J Gallo's Director of Marketing for Premium Innovation, she's managed over $300 million, that's right, you heard me, $300 million in revenue for 9 E&J Gallo wine brands. With over $4.7 billion in annual revenue, E&J Gallo is the largest producer of wine in the US and in the world. She was behind the rise of Coke Zero, leading a $40 million advertising campaign. She's also worked with great brands like Disney and Evian. And today, she's here for you guys to share her story and inspire you on how to become successful in the world of brand marketing. Without further ado, here's Courtney O'Brien. Courtney, it's great to have you on here. And you know what? I'll jump right into it. Why did you choose marketing?
Thanks. It's nice to be here. This is my first podcast. I chose marketing. I was a career changer when I went back to business school to get my MBA. Before business school, I had done consulting, management consulting, coming out of a liberal arts education. And I did that to try to decide what I wanted to do. And then I went back to business school, and I was most interested in my brand management courses because it was a good blend of creativity and consumer empathy, which got into psychology, as well as the data analytics. So I'd say that's why I chose brand marketing to begin with, and I still find that to be the case.
That's excellent. And we'll kind of launch into Disney here. If you can talk about your time at Disney, because I saw that in your resume, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, Disney is the first major company that kind of gave me a chance as a job career changer. So I did my summer internship there during my graduate degree in their consumer products division. So it's how Disney transforms their licensed properties. So I was working on 102 Dalmatians and the film Atlantis, which never went big, but 102 Dalmatians did, into licensed merchandise and marketing that merchandise. Because Disney doesn't really have a product you can hold onto other than their licensed merchandise. So we developed during my summer a huge fashion show that ran on the big stage at New York Fashion Week that used all of the designers that were featured in that movie, and got to meet Glenn Close and Joe Boxer and Betsy Johnson and all those folks. So that was a really exciting summer.
Disney had a very big impact on me as a child, like I said, and Cartoon Network, but Disney was better in my opinion. Let's hope the executives don't hear that. So that's great. So I want to talk a little bit about Coke Zero. It's an excellent brand here. So you were behind the rise of kind of that Coke Zero brand in 2006. If you can just tell the story about what that was like, that would be great.
Yeah, so I was coming from working at Evian within the Coke building, and we can get into that later, but this was my first foray to working for the Coca-Cola company. At the time, I had the choice whether I was going to go onto the Sprite brand team or onto the non-existent Coca-Cola Zero brand team. It had just come over from the people who invented the brand, which is this innovation team, and I was the first member of the quote-unquote brand team to launch it and roll it out nationally. We had no idea if it was going to be big or small. Coke, like any company, has a lot of things we throw out that flop. So most people that I talked to said, you should not choose that. You're just going to be writing the obituary for why it didn't work, most likely. But it turned into one of the rides of my career. It was under the radar because no one really knew how big it was going to be. And it was just a lot of fun. That's the type of environment that I thrive in.
That's great. And so could you talk about some of the things that you did to help bring its popularity up, definitely in the world of marketing? You know, we're talking about, this won awards. I mean, this was just such a great all-around product. But, what did you do to aid the growth of this brand?
Yeah, and we were not challenged to become like the next mega brand of Coke or anything. So it was really interesting. We just set our own goals. I remember setting up like this big ticker board in our area with every time we got an additional point of trial or tenth of a point of trial, we'd put it up in neon letters. So we were just kind of on a mission to change the world like ourselves, not from that much pressure, at least initially from senior leadership. So the biggest thing I did when I came on, I remember reading the launch deck that the innovation team had put together, and I was nodding. I get it. I get why we developed the product. I get the proposition. And then I got to the target audience, and I was like, what? Their target audience originally had been against college-age guys. And the insight was that, obviously you're trying to get people to give up full-calorie soda to drink zero-calorie cola here. And I'm like, I don't know a single college-age guy that cares at all about their waistline at this point. Like, that is not the right life stage. They were going after, we were doing dartboards for frats and everything. It was just ridiculous. So I kind of put a full kibosh on the launch plan the second I started and said, I would like a couple months to reformulate a complete launch plan, and I'll come back to you. So I got it, remarkably. That tells you how under the radar it was. And it was probably April of that year, April of 2006 then, 4 months into when it was supposed to have launched its launch campaign, obviously. And we launched, and it was going after a 25 to 34-year-old guy with the consumer insight that that's the life stage that you start to care, and you can't eat anything you want anymore, and you have to make some trade-offs.
Oh, yeah. I'm starting to feel that now.
Yeah. We also changed the can to black. I don't know if you remember, it was white when it launched, because there was a very strong, you can Google it, it was a very strongly held assumption that diet brands had to be white or silver, that no-calorie brands could not look fully loaded. So that was flipped on its head, and that, I think, had a huge impact. I mean, it was bold, and it was appealing to guys, obviously. And what we've learned for sure that I applied throughout my career is if you build it for guys, the women will still be drawn to it. And vice versa is not necessarily true. Now it's totally acceptable because now it's a mainstream beverage. Back then, you show up with a 0-calorie beverage, you would have gotten looked at very weird when it was first launched.
So in a 2017 blog, Coca-Cola said, "We just broke the internet with the news that we're giving the beloved Coke Zero brand a new name, new look, and delicious taste." Why do you think Coca-Cola did this, and what do you think will be the effect of the rebranding?
Everyone who knows me knows my opinion on this, including all of my friends and coworkers who are still at Coke. And again, I don't have the data, and I wasn't privy to the data and imperatives they used to make the decision to do this because I haven't been there for 10 years now. I believe why they did it, which is something we were talking about even back in '08, is that no sugar, or even real sugar as opposed to high fructose corn syrup, is obviously a big topic of conversation right now in the U.S. And it was even in '06, '07, and '08 in Europe already. And in Europe, they wanted to push the no sugar angle a lot more than the no calorie angle, and we disagreed because in the U.S. back then, it was very much still about calories. Now, I think we've definitely evolved to a place that people are wanting to hear it doesn't have any sugar in it. So they changed it to Coke Zero Sugar. So that in itself would have been fine, I guess, but I think the idea of reformulating it, and again, I don't know if they had any data that said they needed to reformulate it or if there was anything else behind it, but in my experience, when people love something and it's doing very well, they don't want you to make it quote-unquote better. Unless you do baby steps like, the iPhone or Starbucks changes its logo very subtly every year, you don't even notice it to keep it fresh.
I know I don't notice.
Right. But the wholesale change of the taste, especially of a cola, I won't drink anything that's slightly different from my brand of choice of cola, which ironically is Diet Coke, not Coke Zero. Even if I go to Europe, I won't drink it because it tastes a hair different. I don't understand why that wholesale change was needed. I do know also that they were trying to and have been trying for years to make the Coke franchise more cohesive. So Diet Coke, Coke Zero, Coke Classic, the red, silver, and black, all looking like they're part of the same family. And it's all Coca-Cola, but this is your Coca-Cola, this is my Coca-Cola, this is his choice of Coca-Cola. So that's why they kind of all have the unifying red now, which is obviously what the brand stands for. So that's, I think, what they were trying to do. I don't know how successful it'll be. We'll see.
Excellent. Yeah, they even mentioned it in this post. They said, were giving the beloved Coke Zero. So if they hadn't mentioned, if it wasn't beloved, then they wouldn't know how impactful it was. So, but yeah, it's September 2018. We'll see what happens. I'm already reading a lot of, this is my opinion, not Courtney's, by the way, but a lot of people on blogs are mentioning how they're not necessarily happy with the change, and I'm not sure how I feel about that either. So
yeah, whenever I see anyone drinking the new one, you better believe I go up to them and ask them how they like it.
You like that Coke Zero sugar? Yeah, I would do the same thing. So yeah, I want to pop backwards. You also worked with Danone, which owns Evian. So my question to you is, what was it like marketing for Evian when Coke and Evian were partners?
It was really interesting. We had a master distribution agreement with Coke to distribute our products, but we also used, we meaning Evian, we also used Pepsi, we also used Dr. Pepper, we used lots of different distributors. So when Coke moved to become our exclusive distributor, obviously we had to wait till all of those other partnerships ran out till they could truly be our exclusive distributor. But they moved us to the Coca-Cola headquarters from California all the way across country to Atlanta. Okay. We sat in the huge Coca-Cola headquarters building, but we were one little brand team, very lean. We didn't bring with us any of our support functions because the idea was we'd get lean and we'd use Coke support functions. So we were kind of an island in the sea, and we reported up through France still, not to senior leadership in Atlanta. Although there was a team that was focused on helping us transition and kind of being our point people within the Coke organization. But if anyone's worked in brand management, you're fighting for share of mind with sales. And it was even harder because we were, again, another step removed from all of the functions that we needed, such as access to the distributors and the sales force and our audience. And all the internal marketing was very difficult to get done. Our leadership didn't necessarily agree with Coke leadership on things. And globally, Danone and Coke are huge competitors. When Coke entered the water market with Dasani, and Pepsi did so too with Aquafina, it was actually a breach of our contract. So with their distribution of Evian. So it wasn't necessarily smooth sailing. Okay. We kind of had to make our own inroads with the Coke organization in order to be seen and heard and have any airtime at all. But it was very interesting. I learned an absolute ton through that period.
I bet. And so now let's talk about E&J Gallo, which is your current company. And I think a lot of people don't realize the magnitude of this, but E&J Gallo produces so much wine. I mean, we're talking the largest producer of wine in the world. And we're talking, I think I was, just checking the facts on the internet, but $4.7 billion, you can look it up, was produced in a single year. That's incredible. So my question to you, Courtney, is, when you have this company that's already established and already, so big, how, as a brand marketer, do you contribute to that growth to make sure that it's continuing to be successful?
I think I start small. I mean, obviously Coca-Cola is a huge company too. I didn't worry about that. I worried about my little piece of the pie. And I really take an entrepreneurial viewpoint of it. So even within Gallo, what's really funny is I was, and kind of still am, a wine snob, and that's why I wanted to get into the wine industry. But I'm a marketing proponent first and foremost. So being able to combine the two is a dream for me. But the first thing that they assigned me to was Bartles and James, Boone's, Hornsby Cider, Andre Champagne. So, my friends were making a lot of fun of me after getting all my wine degrees that that's what I went into in wine. But anywho, they sell a lot. I love it. They sell a lot of volume. But then I moved over to the premium wine division about 9 months after that. So I just focus on my immediate challenge at hand, honestly, is how I approach things. So when I'm focused on my assigned portfolio, which has ranged from one brand when I was at Coke to like 9 to 12 brands at Gallo, depending on your scope of purview and what your portfolio is at the time, that's my baby. That's how I look at it. That's my world, and that's what I'm focused on over-delivering and really breaking the rules in. And to the extent that I can influence the environment around me, whether that's my business unit or the broader marketing function or the broader company, that's great. But so I don't really get thrown off by the fact that it's such a big company that's so successful.
Okay. And I want to talk about Apothic for a little bit. This is, by the way, just a great brand. It became, number 3 in the premium plus category. And I'll give you guys just a little background. At Premium Plus, I believe it's $10 and up. Okay, so it did so well. So my question is to you, what did you do to grow that brand?
So this is another one that I didn't think it could happen again after Coke Zero, but it did. So I took over this brand. It was just about finishing the development of it from the previous team. They had made all the line decisions already. They were just about to finalize the label. They'd named it. They didn't have a consumer launch plan, though. So I finished up the finalization of the product, and they did all of the launch planning, everything from kind of what's the positioning, what does the brand stand for, who's the desired audience, and how are we going to launch it. And it was really a big change for the category. There were not, and it's hard to imagine now, but there were not black wine labels out there. This was really different. And apparently that's what I'm known for at this point, is black things. But it was very, very different. It has a bright red A on it with a filigree that almost looks like the scarlet letter. It was not your white premium wine label with cursive writing and a chateau behind it by any means. And we were going after millennials, and it was really the beginning of calling them millennials. It was when we tested the final labels, there was another label that actually did better overall than the one we chose. But when we looked at it, the one we chose had really high resonance with the younger group, like the under 45, which aren't the majority or haven't been in the past of wine category dollars. The over 45 group is. So, but this particular label did amazingly with the younger than 45 group. So we went back and we're like, okay, somebody's got to look into this real quick. Is the younger than 45 group driving the growth of the category? And what's amazing to me is we didn't know this. And you just take it so for granted now, but this was 2008, and that was not a well-known fact back then. So we looked into it and we're like, oh my God, it is. It really is driving the growth of the category. And there was such high resonance with that group to this other label that we actually chose that we made a leap and went with that one. So it was kind of a slightly smaller group, but with real passion, choosing that over more broad but more tempered resonance with the other label. So then I think the next thing that we really did that was different is we really leaned in on that consumer and on the insights. We didn't just half lean in on them. And it was risky. And again, this is another example of a brand that no one expected to be huge. So we had the ability to do this. If we had the CEO breathing down our neck asking us when we were going to be 2 million cases, we probably wouldn't have made these choices. And I say that every day as we're trying to make these new brands with obviously huge growth targets. We have to pretend we don't have these huge growth targets, because if we're trying to make something that's going to appeal to that many people, it's going to be too vanilla. And I think that's the biggest risk. But we kind of did that without even knowing it back on Apothic, because we didn't have these huge growth targets. Red blends was a really small category. There was really only one major player, and we were going after a completely different consumer, millennials. So what we did is every part of the marketing mix, first of all, we decided what we were going to spend our funds on. We did not have a ton of money, and you can spend your money on a million things. And we usually spread it like peanut butter across everything and try to do a little bit of everything. What we did here is we said we're going to lean in on 3 different things for Apothic. We're going to lean in on social media, which was really new at the time in 08, beginning of 09, for a premium plus wine brand to be doing a lot on social media. Not only did we have a Facebook page, but we were doing all sorts of advertising. We were starting to get into videos, and that's always been one of our guiding posts that we still maintain is huge ownership in social media space. We were the first wine brand ever to put a quote, consumer quotes from social media on our point of sale instead of like a Robert Parker quote. I remember Robert Parker had an amazing quote on Apothic that arguably propelled the brand for sure with the gatekeepers, the retailers. They started taking it seriously when Robert Parker said something, but we didn't put that on the case stacker. What we put on there was consumers' quotes in quotation marks, and then quoting like Sophie K from Facebook, for example, and what she had to say about it, because our insight was that it's about word of mouth with millennials, and it's about hearing from your peers and peer reviews much more so than whatever wine advocate is out there who you've never heard of. So we leaned in on social media. We leaned in on experiential. So the wine was so different and so consumer friendly and unlike anything else out there that we wanted people to taste it. So we put a lot of dollars against events. We upgraded all of our events. We made them sensory experiences. We did things in the dark. We had people smelling vanilla leaves. We used language that was very consumer friendly. It wasn't, hints of pear and elderberry. It was, do you smell the vanilla? Doesn't it taste, it was words that people knew that they could relate to. Then the third thing we did was in-store. So instead of just a nice case card or a wine bin, which is all that was in the store at the time, and still is the majority, we did outlandish things on Apothic. We created this crazy mirror that was hand-carved in Russia, like a black Rococo type of mirror, and we called it the creepy mirror, that was humongous. We created thrones in store. We made huge statement pieces that you could see from across the store and really over-delivered on brand equity. And if it was today that we were doing that, people would be Instagramming it, right? It would be Instagrammable content. And that's still what we talk about doing now. Back then it wasn't happening, but it was the same type of stuff. People would take pictures of it. So we were choiceful with where we put our dollars, and that meant we could really make a dent in each of those three areas. And we really leaned in on millennial behavior, even though our sales force and our management didn't get it at all. I remember presenting at a sales conference what we were going to do for the following year, and it was silent in the room with the 50-plus-year-old men. And luckily, by that point, it was literally one of our sales VPs stood up and said, Courtney, I don't know what the hell you just said, but just keep doing it because it's working. So we really went right to the consumer. And that doesn't always work. You really got to get sales on board too. But when you're starting to have success, they don't want to mess with it. And sometimes they recognize they're not the target consumer and they can't relate to it, but they're going to do it anyway. So that, I say, is in a nutshell what we did to make Apothic successful.
Okay, excellent. And Courtney, I want to thank you so much for so far giving kind of a backstory on some of the amazing points in your career. I think these are just such great brands, so we could not talk about them. All right, so I want to move into the career advice portion of this podcast. So my question to you, Courtney, is what is the best way to break into a career in brand marketing?
So by brand marketing, I'm kind of interpreting that we're talking about brand management, which is one type of marketing. I'd really caution people who want to get into marketing for taking everything I'm about to say as a broad generalization about every type of marketing. Marketing is a broad term that can apply to a lot of different things. My whole career has been in brand management, which is really the management of a brand in everything about it. And in business school, we talk about the 4 Ps. Everything about what goes into the product. For wine, it's the package, it's the capsule, etc. Where it gets distributed, what it's priced at, and what's your go-to-market and consumer and promotion strategy. So every one of those, and some of them are fuzzy and some of them are quantitative. So for getting into brand management, obviously an MBA is highly desirable, and getting experience prior to an MBA is necessity at this point. It even was when I went back in 1999. I think another really good real life experience to have prior to getting into marketing, or as you're getting your MBA, or before your MBA, or even in lieu of your MBA for some of our marketers, is sales, doing some work in sales. And not necessarily like at the Gap, but like sales, like for example, Gallo sales. Gallo has an amazing Salesforce training program where you're literally calling on retailers, you're presenting the portfolio, you're hearing their feedback, you're learning how to pitch it, you're developing empathy and grit and perseverance. And that is, at Gallo, the family makes all of their children who want to get into the business start with that. They believe in that fully. So it's really an invaluable background to have as you're trying to get into marketing. But I say also studying marketing. If you're getting into brand management, you have to have a solid quantitative background, at least at the more junior levels, and you got to make it through the junior level to get to the more senior level. So I use my high school math every day, put it that way.
Okay. Well, you're 5 steps ahead of me then. Because I still use my iPhone calculator. We'll edit that part out too. but it's that's awesome. That's just amazing. But I mean, I think that's a perfect segue into my next question. And I get so many professionals. I get resumes sent to me all the time that are from marketing professionals, and a lot of them are, beginning off in their career or kind of in the early to middle stages. So this is valuable advice for them. And a perfect segue into my next question, which is, what makes a good marketer? If you're looking to hire somebody for your team at E&J Gallo, who would you hire to be on your team? And if you could just give, some top traits, that would be great.
Yeah. First of all, no spelling mistakes on your resume. That is an absolute, I don't even want to meet with the person. So
okay.
Definitely listen to Chris. I would say a solid education. It can be specific in marketing, but doesn't have to be. We have a ton of people that come from a lot of other disciplines, and we love that. I think the most well-rounded teams are made up of former engineers, former PR people. So we have a real diversity in people that we look at. If you're coming in at the junior levels at Gallo, they don't insist on an MBA. But a sales background in lieu of that is very helpful. Some other companies like Coke do insist on MBA. They really only hire a postgraduate. But Gallo lets you work your way up. I think what you obviously have to have the right bullet points on your resume. You have to have some marketing experience. You have to be able to talk to consumer empathy. So we always ask general questions like, what's your favorite campaign out there and why? It doesn't matter, obviously, what the answer is, but just to get to, do you have consumer empathy? Can you speak to a target consumer? Can you get rid of your own hang-ups and opinions and put yourself in the place of someone else and talk to why something's effective or not effective? Obviously, ability and comfort with quantitative, which is really hard to get across in an interview. You're kind of taking a leap of faith. But if you can quantify things on your resume and speak to it effectively, then that really helps instill confidence. And then there's a lot of intangibles that we try to get that's hard in an interview. One of the big ones that we really value a lot that makes you successful or not successful at Gallo is grit. We call it grit. We even have a guide called How to Hire for Grit. And it's really about the rolling up your sleeves, doing what needs to be done, perseverance, and ability to show examples and a track record of doing that. Because even though Gallo is a huge company, it's still very scrappy. We consider ourselves very scrappy. Each individual team is pretty lean. Our budgets are very low compared to beer, spirits, and certainly soft drinks. Probably on the high end of the wine industry, but that doesn't hold a candle to how much the others spend. So we really pride ourselves on people that are willing to roll up their sleeves and do what needs to be done, rather than just what they're asked to do. Determination, a huge thing for Gallo is humility. So that's really a big thing. So when we hire from other big marketing companies, that's something we really look for, because there's a lot of people I've run into at other big marketing companies that are not exactly humble. And that doesn't fly for a family-run business at Gallo, where that is core to their family DNA. Gallo doesn't have signs on their buildings, literally. There are no signs on any of the buildings around town. It's very difficult. We have wanted to use a lot of the things that Gallo has been doing throughout the generations as marketing points for various brands over the years, because I think if people knew about them, they would eat it up. So, for example, they've been doing since the days of Giulio Gallo, who passed away in the 90s, something called the 50-50 Give Back program, which means for every acre of land we plant to vines, we leave an acre untouched for the natural habitat. And he didn't do it because it was cool back in the 30s and 40s and 50s. He did it because, according to him, it was the right thing to do for long-term land stewardship. And so, I mean, how much do people eat that up nowadays? But we are basically not allowed to talk about it as marketers because of the it's just something that the family does, and they don't want awards for it, and they don't want to brag about it. And so there's countless examples like that. And we look for that kind of approach in how people approach things too. We don't need any braggarts and people who think they're better than the other people around them, and one-man shows around here.
That's a great philosophy. And I hope anyone, like, it doesn't matter if you're in marketing or you are the CEO, founder of a startup, like, that's great advice to live by. And I think just a great all around principle. So my question to you now is, what is the biggest thing you wish you knew in your career that would have helped the younger you overcome major obstacles?
I think the biggest thing I've evolved as a marketer especially is to not be a bulldozer. So I am an A-type personality. I am from New York, so I can relate to the Northeasterners that are often accused of being pushy, especially living in California. And I used to definitely be a bulldozer earlier in my career. You know, I was going to get that goal accomplished come hell or high water and get out of my way if you're not on board. I didn't realize that I was doing that, but I made some enemies in the process that I think in the end became friends. But I've definitely gotten a lot better at that. And I think it's still a really delicate balance between having high standards and doing what needs to be done for your business and making the calls, being decisive in making the calls, not just pitter-pattering around it and kind of letting it just hang out there, while not pissing people off. So if you're supposed to work with certain internal departments, for example, on something, but you don't feel like you're getting the best work, do you make the call and go external? Even though you might, it's hard to do it gently with the internal people that you're going to see every day. But, you know, on a very fast track business and something that has to get launched in 9 months with a strong campaign, can't wait around for the best work forever. So that's just an example of tough decisions and the finesse that's required in interpersonal relationships to be effective, especially at a family-run business, but even at any company, I think, while getting the best work you can.
That's a great answer. Thank you for that. And so you even mentioned it. So like you have this campaign, you have to get it out in 9 months, or you just have a whole bunch of different tasks to accomplish kind of in your career. So I can imagine it's a lot. It's not easy. So my question to you would be, you know, what's the best way to avoid career burnout in marketing so we can try to prevent that as much as possible?
Yeah, and I've known I think 2 or 3 people that had major breakdowns in my career and left and did something totally different, even at a senior level. And it hasn't happened to me, and I don't feel like it's going to happen imminently, which is kind of amazing. I've always been the person that leaves when I need to leave. I guess I never felt that need to show face time, and that's probably a credit to the companies that I worked for and the culture. But I was always on the early side to leave, whether or not I had kids. And now I have 3 kids, but you know, I haven't up until 7 years ago. But I had to leave to go do yoga. I had to leave to go to the gym. And now I have to leave to pick up the kids. And I'll get back on if I need to later at night. But I need that balance, and that is what I'm constantly telling people who work for me. It's the first thing I tell people when they come to work on my team is, I need you to be here for the long run. It doesn't do me any good for you to kill yourself in the short run and then get burned out and leave. And what you need is going to be different than what I need, so you just need to tell me. I have someone who lives an hour and a half away, and she comes to the office most days of the week. But I don't need her to feel like she has to come when she doesn't really need to in order to impress me and then get burned out sooner. I need people to make the call of what they need and what they're willing to do, and we'll work with it rather than giving their all and burning out quicker. So I think it's just looking at it as a long-term marathon and finding balance in it every day.
That's a great response. And, some accountability does go on the employer and the company to make sure that you are, how do you say, showcasing a culture that isn't, toxic. It's not like you're really driving your employees to the ground. So I think on one end, that's important, but also to remember that on the receiving end, there are a lot of action steps that you can take to make sure that you're not, driving yourself to the ground. So
yeah. And as a job seeker too, I think it's one of my biggest concerns when I even crosses my mind about looking for a new job ever is, will I be able to forge the path that works for me that I have at fill in the blank company that I've worked for a while and have established kind of a legitimacy at, with a new employer, because of course they'll tell you during the interview process, yes, we have great work-life balance, but I think you need to talk to the employees. And now you got Glassdoor.com and all sorts of places that you can do research on the reality and see if it would work for you.
That's a great word of advice. Similar, but maybe not so related. I remember hearing things about an apartment. You don't ask the leasing agents, what their opinion is on the apartment. You ask, some of the residents, what their experiences are. So I just think that's great advice for job seekers as well. So great. So, Courtney, your answers have been absolutely incredible. I think really good advice for the people who are within brand management, marketing, whatsoever. So I want to kind of ask, kind of tie this all together. Do you have any final words of advice for marketing professionals or professionals in brand management?
Yeah, I think that if you try one kind of marketing and don't like it, don't assume that you're not going to like all different kinds of marketing. My only experience has been with brand management, which is a very quantitative, intensive style of marketing. It's more towards general management. It's like being an entrepreneur of a little business, whatever your business is. You've got to do all aspects of it. And where people go from brand management, sometimes they go to be general managers of a company. A lot of our companies, general managers over the years from different companies have come from brand. But a lot of other people decide that I'd rather stay on the marketing side. I'd rather be the CMO someday than the general manager because I like all aspects of marketing better than I want to manage a plant, for example. So I think when you try different styles in different companies, even brand management across the big companies out there, the General Mills, Procter & Gamble's, Coke, Pepsi, etc., are not the same at all. They're not created equal. A lot of them are more structured than others, and your personality might work better with some rather than others. So do a lot of research and think about what type you want to get into and ask people and call around and network. And then don't assume that you hate marketing if you don't like the first try.
Right, exactly. I always telling people be targeted, be as targeted as possible. And that does help with your job search. And I'm no career coach. I'm just a resume writer, but I know it works and I know it helps. So, there are many different types of marketing. And so, yes, find the one that's right for you. And that can take you far.
Yeah.
So this is great. Courtney, once again, thanks for joining us in this podcast. And for everyone listening right now, I'm going to post Courtney O'Brien's LinkedIn below, so you can see kind of her career progression and how she was able to move forward with her career. It's really an incredible story, and I think LinkedIn is where it's at. They're better than resumes in my opinion because you can get more of a well-rounded, in-depth view about somebody's professional history. So that's going to be posted in the link below. So once again, Courtney, I'd like to thank you so much for joining me on the LEG, that's Let's Eat Grandma Job Seekers podcast, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.